Hello everyone, and welcome to another part in our Aurora 4X design tutorials. Today we are going to look into turrets. Turrets are a special part of ship equipment that is basically a movable platform that you put your weapons on. Now it has its uses and it has its, weaknesses. I would like to show you today how to design a turret. However, as with missiles, as with engines, there are so many applications, so many things that you can think about, and so many specific things that I will miss at this video because it could have 3 or 4 hours if I was trying to explain everything about turrets alone, that take this as a general advice and experiment and apply this according to what is happening in your game. So let's start by looking at what a turret is. We spoke about turret being a platform that mounts weapons. For that reason, you need to decide what kind of purpose it is going to have in your fleet. Now, there are turrets that are strictly anti-missile. There are turrets that would better be described as anti-ship. And there are turrets that I would consider anti-fighter. Each one of these have their own design logic, and I'm gonna try to speak a bit about them now. So, if you wanted to design an anti-ship turret, you're basically trying to make something bigger that moves a bit faster, or basically rotates a bit faster, so that it can hit an enemy ship that is moving faster than your own. This is actually kind of cool because it can take some pressure away from your engines. So, for example, battle cruisers should always be equipped, if they are not carrying a sufficient missile armament, with turrets that are capable of hitting enemy ships. Now, there are anti-fighter turrets, which would be basically, I guess, even smaller turrets. You can make them less, what would be the word? Probably less bulky and less armed and less, robust. But they need to turn faster. They need to hit faster because fighters and bombers are moving faster. Last category of turrets would be anti-missile turrets, which could also be called point defense. These ones are very specific because they will be your last line of defense against incoming fire and thus require quite a lot of space in your plans. So, there are different types of weapons that you can mount on your turrets. You can go with gauss cannons, which are pretty cool because they shoot several shots every time you use them. Their weakness is limited range, so that kind of sucks. But they do not need a reactor on your ship, so that is definitely a good thing to note. You will start with this kind of technology, so you can see that the maximum range is only 10,000 kilometers, and it shoots only one shot every 5 seconds. However, still, if you invest the power and your, I would say, time and efficiency and research points into this, they can become the best point defense things in the game because they will be so rapid with shooting, especially when mounted as quad turrets, that, well, it's hard to say that no missile is going to touch you. That's a bit far-fetched, but you will take most of them before they can even touch you. Now, lasers are probably all-round basic, easiest thing to start with. They have very good penetration against armor, they have decent range, and I would most of the time recommend these against anti-ship or anti-fighters, depending on what you are trying to do with them, what you're trying to hit. Then there's meson cannons. Meson cannons are pretty weird, or they're different in a way that they do a ton of damage to ships by bypassing armor. They do always exactly one damage point, but again they bypass armor. So if you can hit a heavily armored target with a lot of shots from meson cannon, you can direct to disable or destroy it without actually touching its armor. So it's pretty cool, but requires a different strategy, and we're not going to deal with it today. Notable thing about mesons though is that it's the only one of the weapons I mentioned that can be mounted on a land-based PDC on a planet, well, an asteroid wouldn't have an atmosphere, but on a planet and a moon that has atmosphere. Lasers and microwaves and other type of weapons cannot pass through the atmosphere and hit the target. So that's actually pretty important to know. Now after mesons there is... did we skip microwave? No, then there's particle beams. Particle beams, I don't really use them. They're a variant of laser beams. It's up to you to test them. It's up to you to see what you want to do with them. Then there's... really, where is the microwave? Oh, it's here. High power microwave. That's the last type of weapon that you can mount on your turret. These directly damage enemy sensors, so thus making the enemy ships blind virtually. So what kind of weapons you want to use is up to you. Mostly what happens is that people choose one or tops two of these and stick with them, because to get I would say like to get a good or worthy outcome from designing turrets and designing weapons, you need to have a bit of a more focused approach than with other technologies in the game. Because, for example, just designing this high-power microwave would cost us 1,000 research points. We're gonna go with a laser here though, which is slightly cheaper and can be advanced into a bit faster. Now, the reason why you need to be careful with this is that this is where the problems can start. You need to know what you are doing here. We have a damaged output that is the damage of the weapon. For lasers, it is in one line of the armor. So if you had, for example, an armor that would have 6 layers, this one would penetrate through the entire armor but wouldn't hit the hull. If we had 6 and there were just 5 layers, it would make a deep, like a needle hit into the armor, destroying all of the armor in one line and then hitting the hull. So I hope you guys understand what this means. If not, please ask away. So this is what the damage output for the laser is. It's different from what missiles do. Rate of fire is how many times the laser you are going to have fires within a certain amount of time. For example, this one would fire every 10 seconds. This comes down to the capacitor recharge rate technology. For example, if you had only capacitor recharge rate 2 and you would be trying to have the laser focus size of 15 centimeters, which is the damage of the weapon, you would need to wait 15 seconds. If you, however, had the damage output of 3, then even with capacitor recharge rate of 3, you would shoot every 5 seconds. So it's a bit of an alchemy. The reason why you should primarily use the bigger focus size is the fact that the max range increases with focus size. Same goes for the laser wavelength, which increases range primarily. It has no other different effect on your laser. Capacitor I spoke about already. It's worth saying that, for example, 15 centimeter focus size shooting every 10 seconds is probably way less useful than a damage of 4 shooting every 5 seconds, because you get double the damage. Well, no, you would have 6 every 10 and here you have 8 every 10. But you have a diminishing range. So it really again is about what you want to do. There are also energy weapon mounts. You have standard mount and a spinal mount, which increases and decreases range, damage, but also increases the power requirement of your weapon. So it's worth experimenting with this, deciding what you want to do with it, and sticking with it. Now here we are coming to the reason why you need to do turrets. The reason why you need to have turrets on your ships is that if you don't, the tracking speed of your beam weapons is equal to your ship's speed. So for example, if you had a 1500 kilometers per second ship, it would have a tracking speed of 1500 kilometers per second. Now when you meet some nasty aliens which have a speed of say 8 to 10,000, way beyond what your ships can do, you will have a huge problem hitting them. That would be equal to around 5 to 10% chance, I think, maybe even less. However, turrets themselves can have a very different way of working. So let's go with, we're not gonna primarily go for range here, we're gonna go for the damage output, and we're gonna call this the test laser. Okay, so let's instant it. And now when we go to the turret design, yes, I know it's there at the design. You can go here. I just don't know why I never learned to do that. Here we are in a turret design menu. Now we are going to put in our test laser, and you can see that we can decide how many beams or how many of these weapons will be on the turret we are designing. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now a bit of word about this. This does not only increase the development cost, but also the price and mostly the size. As you need to invest heavily into doing researching a turret, it is most of the time less demanding on you to have single or twin turrets and then using more than one on bigger ships than having separate quad and twin turrets, because the quad ones will be really big and mounting them on smaller ships might prove very troubling for you, and for their speed and their ratings. So always keep this in mind, that you are greatly increasing your ship's size and all the burdens of coming with that when you put more than one weapon on your turret. Now, the biggest advantage of a turret is that you can basically yourself decide what your tracking speed is. I'm not kidding. You can, for example, put 500,000 kilometers there. It will show you what the research cost would be. Maximum tracking speed 500,000 kilometers. Power requirement, we would have a quad turret, then it would take almost 10,000 research points. But yeah, you would have a quad turret that turns around at this speed, shoots every 5 seconds, and has a damaged output of 4 times 4. So against missiles, that would be extremely good. Against ship, I cannot imagine a ship going this speed. It's really up to you. You can just decide if you can accommodate this, and if this is something you're going for, go for it. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you have, for example, this on your turret, but your beam control, that's another thing that you need when you're designing weapons. If you go for any type of beam-based weapon, you need beam fire control, because the missile fire control only works for your missiles, logically. So the beam fire control has its own fire control speed rating and its range. And you have this on your weapons as well. So if you have a massive tracking speed and range on your turret, but your beam control is not able to do that, the lesser value is the final outcome. So for example, if you had a 500,000 kilometers per second tracking speed on your turret, but this one would be able to track max at 5,000 kilometers per second, the turret can track at max 5,000 kilometers per second. So there needs to be a balance. You cannot go insane on one and forget about the other. However, thank God, there are possibilities how to extend this by increasing the price and size of your beam fire control. I think that you can go up to 16 times the strength, and you will increase the range 4 times and tracking speed 4 times. Now this would be still vastly inferior to what we were doing with the turret a few seconds ago. However, you will never ever need well, no, that might be a lie, but I'm pretty sure that most of the time you will not need something as high. Now, by this, you can see that you need to know what you're facing when you design the turret. You need to have a plan. If there is a 10,000 kilometer per second missile coming at you from the enemy, then you know that you will need a tracking speed of around 10,000 on your turrets so that you can easily dispose of the enemy missiles. If you are doing an anti-ship turret, you will then use the most common speed of enemy ships as your desired tracking speed. So this again, you know, it's hard to advise you about anything, you know, definite with these things when it all basically comes up to what you will face. It's the same with the weapons, it's the same with engines, but this is the overall thing that governs your I would say, specific scenario. Now, one more thing that is important about the turrets, you can add additional armor thickness on your turrets, thus preventing them from being damaged and destroyed. You can put 1, but yeah, look at that. If we had this kind of oh my god, turret size, it would have 160 hull size with this speed, and if we added 1 layer of armor, it would have 183. Jesus. Let's go with the 20,000 that we saw before. The turret size would be 28.4. For a quad, that's not that bad. It's basically 1,500 tons. You know, something less. If we add it to, yeah, it scales pretty badly though. But this is like an additional layer of protection on your turrets, because, you know, if your turret is hit and destroyed, you are pretty much screwed. So it's kind of important to keep this in mind as well. And, you know, adding at least 1 layer might be a good idea, you know, to protect your ships. So once this is done, you basically can just go with it, design it, research it, and then you can put it on your ships. Now, ton of this and the performance of it, you know, it goes down to fire control speed rating, turret tracking speed. You need to design different weapons first to see how the output is going to be. Again, with, for example, the Gauss cannons, I would definitely go with quad and try to make them as your useful point defense. With lasers, you can go with single ones or twin ones and try to make them a bit more offensive. It really depends. In my experience though, in the beginning of the game, it is much easier to start with missiles, because both offensive and defensive type of missiles perform better in the beginning with the technology you can have and you can use. It's also cheaper. But as the game goes on and on, eventually beam type weapons become a bit more useful, because they have a huge advantage of not needing any ammo. So a fleet can operate for years without having to get more missiles, and it can just keep killing. So that's the biggest advantage of beam type weapons, turrets and stuff like that. So basically this is all. I don't know if I should mention anything else. The design the tracking speed. It all has to come down to what you want to do. Do you want to aim it at ships? Do you want to aim it at fighters? Do you want to aim it at missiles? What type of enemy ships, fighters, and missiles are you encountering? Do you need more? Do you need less? You know, it comes up to this. Just make sure that you always have enough reactors to power up your turrets. I think it shows here, yeah, power requirement for the turret. So you need to have at least this amount of power on your ship to replenish the turret so that it can shoot every 5 seconds. Same way with single weapons. You also shouldn't ever forget about the necessity of having the same tracking speed on both your turret and your beamfire controls. Then there's the armor thickness that I mentioned, and I guess, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Just pay attention to details when designing turrets, because the research cost for every turret and weapon is quite high. Okay, so make sure that you actually know what you are doing when you're designing a turret.